My name is Wen Ce. My father chose that name. He said that in life, you don't rely on brute force, you rely on your mind. You have to listen, to observe, to keep things in your heart, and only then can you come up with a plan. I have worked as a safety engineer for 12 years, and that is exactly what I rely on. Every rule, every inspection item, every signature, I guard them as if they are my life. Because I know very well that these things usually look like scrap paper, but when your life is on the line, they are more reliable than human sentiment. That evening was the charity preview for the Qinghai Youth Activity Center. The hall was decorated with colorful ribbons and balloons. Red wine and donation plaques sat on the tables. I stood in a corner wearing my work overalls, completely out of place. But I had to be there because my company was responsible for the center's safety inspection. During the last inspection, I had specifically marked the decorative wall panels in the east corridor in red on the report. Those panels were something Zhou Tingshen had insisted on buying from an unqualified supplier. He said it was for the visual effect, cheap and good-looking. I stopped him 3 times. I wrote 3 emails. I held a meeting. At the time, Zhou Tingshen laughed in the group chat and said, "Listen to our engineer Wen. He clings to his inspection checklist like it's a royal decree. This isn't responsibility. It's just throwing his weight around." Some people laughed. Gu Anran did not laugh, but she did not speak up for me either. She simply turned her phone over and placed it face down on the table, as if that would stop me from seeing that she was reading that group chat. Gu Anran is my wife, the captain of the Qingshan Fire Squadron. Zhou Tingshen is her first love and the squadron's unofficial external consultant. The relationship between the 3 of us should have been me, her, and him. But somewhere along the way, it became him and her, with me standing on the side. I did not think much of it then. Looking back now, the cracks were already there. I just chose not to see them. Just as the preview was about to end, the fire started on the east side. It was not a sudden explosion like in the movies. First, there was smoke, then a small flame, and then those decorative panels I had warned about repeatedly caught fire, as if doused in oil, swallowing the entire corridor in an instant. When the alarm went off, I was right at the east stairwell, checking the emergency exit. I turned around, and the fire had already blocked my way out. I shouted into the walkie-talkie, "Someone is trapped at the east stairwell." "This is Wen Ce." No one replied. I shouted again. Still nothing.
The fire grew bigger.
The smoke pressed down from the ceiling like a black hand covering my mouth and nose. I dropped to the ground, wrapped my coat around my head, and squeezed myself against the corner of the wall. I could feel the steel fire door behind me warping from the heat, groaning as if it were a person struggling for breath. And then I saw Gu Anran. Her helmet, her reflective stripes, her shoulder badge, a 07, my wife's unit number. I knew it better than my own ID number. She stood at the other end of the corridor, maybe 5 or 6 meters away. "Anran," I shouted. Her head turned toward me. There was smoke between us, but it was not so thick that she could not see anything. Our eyes met. She saw me. Her eyes widened for a moment, her lips moved as if she was about to call my name. Then another voice came from behind her. "Anran, I can't breathe." Zhou Tingshen. He stood near the lobby exit, one hand on the wall and the other clutching his chest, standing perfectly upright, but his voice trembled as if he had fallen off a cliff. Yet his position was less than 2 steps from a shattered glass door. Gu Anran turned her head back. "Don't move. I'm coming for you," she shouted to him, and then she ran toward him. I saw everything clearly. I was 5 or 6 meters from her. He was 6 or 7 meters from her. The fire was burning fiercest around me. Above him, the smoke was almost thin enough to see the ceiling clearly. But after she glanced my way, she still turned around. I lay on the floor and shouted her name a second time. She did not look back. Her walkie-talkie crackled. The command center was asking, a 07, report your location. Have you found any trapped persons? While dragging Zhou Tingshen out, She spoke into her radio. "I have located one trapped civilian. He is now safe. East corridor. No visual on any other persons. No visual on any other persons." 7 words. With that, she erased me from her life. In that moment, my mind became strangely calm. Not numb from fear, truly calm. The kind of calm that hits you when you are on the brink of death and suddenly understand many things. I reached into my coat and took out my phone. The screen had a crack, but it still worked. I opened the emergency upload app I had set up long ago. This habit was something Zhou Tingshen used to mock me for. He called me Cameraman Wen, the guy who films everything. He did not understand. This was my professional instinct and my last ace. The signal was weak. The progress bar crawled forward. Behind me, the fire door let out another muffled thump, as if something had exploded inside. The shockwave pushed me half a meter forward. My back slammed against the wall, and my phone almost flew out of my hand. I did not let go. 96%. 97%. I stared at that progress bar as if it were the last straw of hope. Not hope for rescue. Hope for justice. 100%. Upload complete. I shoved the phone back into my coat and started crawling toward the rear kitchen window. Later, it was the second rescue crew that pulled me through that window. I heard someone yell, "The dearie's still, someone alive." I heard boots crunching on broken glass, and then I blacked out. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying next to an ambulance, an oxygen mask on my face. My throat burned as if I had swallowed chili oil. The first person I saw was not a doctor or a nurse. It was Gu Anran. She stood by another ambulance with an emergency blanket draped over her shoulders. Beside her sat Zhou Tingshen. He was breathing oxygen too, but he had no neck brace, no soot on his face, not even a singed hole on his clothes from sparks. A nurse was checking his pulse. His other hand held Gu Anran's hand. Gu Anran did not pull away. She bent down and said something to him. I could not hear her from that distance, but it was probably something like, "It's okay now. I'm here." My wife had just left me in a fire and was now comforting another man, telling him that everything was fine. Later at the hospital, Zhou Tingshen and I were placed in 2 adjacent bays, separated only by a cloth curtain. I could hear everything from his side. The doctor said, "Your condition is not serious. Just stay for observation." Then I heard Zhou Tingshen say, "Doctor, my chest feels tight and my throat hurts. Could you write me a diagnosis of moderate smoke inhalation?" The doctor was silent for a few seconds before replying, "Sir, I cannot write that based on your vital signs." "Just write down the symptoms you observe," Zhou Tingshen said, his voice dropping to a familiar oily tone. "I'll have Anran talk to your department head later. We're all on the same side here." I did not make a sound. I reached under my pillow, grabbed my phone and started recording. Then the nurse came in with a registration form and asked if I wanted to keep my emergency contact unchanged. I looked at those 3 words, Gu Anran. Years ago, when we first got together, she had written her name there and drawn a little heart next to it. She had traced that heart 3 times, the ink bleeding through the paper. Every year after that, I kept that registration form. She used to tease me for keeping even scrap paper. I pulled the oxygen mask aside a bit. My voice was hoarse like sandpaper scraping against glass. "Remove her." The nurse blinked. "Mr. When you mean you want to change it?" "Yes, take her off my emergency contacts, medical decision-making authority, visitation rights, all revoked. Without my written consent, she is nothing but a stranger to me." The nurse looked at me for a moment, said nothing more, and brought me a tablet. My fingers were wrapped in bandages. My signature was crooked, but I wrote every character, stroke by stroke. After the nurse left, I took out my phone and called my childhood friend and personal lawyer, Wen Ce. He picked up after 2 rings. "Wen Ce, I'll make this quick. There was a fire at the Qinghe Center. I've already uploaded all the relevant evidence to the cloud. I need you to do 3 things right now. First, preserve all the audio and video materials as technical evidence. Second, retrieve Tonight's dispatch recordings and hospital admission records. Third, draft a divorce agreement. On the other end of the line, Wen Ce was silent for about 3 seconds. You're in the hospital? Yes. How bad are you hurt? Ill live. Do you need me to come and verify your mental state? Legally, I need to prove you were of sound mind when you signed the documents. I let out a laugh from deep in my throat. Even to my own ears, it sounded like a broken bellows. I have never been more clear-headed in my life. Wen Ce arrived faster than I had expected. Less than 20 minutes after I hung up the phone, he pushed open the door to my hospital room. He was wearing a dark grey suit, carrying a briefcase, his hair neatly combed. It was past 2 in the morning, yet he looked like he had just stepped out of a board meeting, not crawled out of bed. You look worse than your divorce case, he said, scanning the tubes and bandages on my body. Thanks for the compliment, I said. Wen Ce did not laugh. He pulled a chair next to my bed, sat down, and lowered his voice. I watched the footage. You called her name twice in the East Corridor. She turned around, saw you, and then turned away to pull out Zhou Tingshen. Correct. What was Zhou Tingshen's condition at that moment? Standing, one hand on the wall, 2 steps from the exit. Wen Ce pulled a notebook from his briefcase and scribbled a few lines. Then he looked up at me. I will retrieve Gu Anran's dispatch recordings at dawn. Also Zhou Tingshen's triage records and vital signs data. We can't wait on these things. If we wait too long, they have a way of going missing. I nodded. This was Wen Ce's job. He knew better than I did how evidence could grow legs and walk away. The divorce agreement is being drafted, he said, closing his notebook. But I need to tell you up front. This divorce won't be simple. Gu Anran is a public official. Zhou Tingshen is operating under the title of an unofficial consultant. There are not just marital issues here, but disciplinary issues and possibly even civil liability. Are you sure you want to flip the whole table? Flip the whole table, I said. Wen Ce looked at me for 2 seconds and nodded. Fine. Then I will add one more thing. From now on, all communication between you and Gu Anran goes through legal channels. Do not speak to her alone. Do not take her private calls. If she comes to the hospital to see you, I will have someone block her. Just as he finished speaking, the sound of rapid footsteps came from the hallway outside, high heels clicking on the tile floor. I recognized that rhythm. Gu Anran walked fast, always landing on her heels first, like a drumbeat. Sure enough, the curtain was yanked open. Gu Anran stood in the doorway. She was still wearing that dark blue fire service uniform, her hair pulled into a casual ponytail, a streak of soot still smeared on her cheek. Her eyes found me first, and then Wen Ce, who was sitting beside my bed. Wen Ce? She froze for a moment. What are you doing here? Wen Ce stood up and nodded at her. Anran, long time no see. Cut the act. Gu Anran's face darkened as she turned to me. Wen Ce, what exactly are you doing? The nurse station told me you changed your emergency contact. And why can't my keycard unlock the smart lock at home anymore? I ignored her first question. How is Zhou Tingshen? Gu Anran's expression flickered. Not guilt, but the reaction of someone caught off guard by a sudden jab. Hez in the observation room. Nothing serious. I can see that, I said. He could stand and shout your name. He could hold your hand. He could walk out of the fire on his own feet. No, nothing serious at all. What are you implying? What I am implying, I said, pulling my phone from under the pillow and placing it face up on the blanket, is that his triage tag was green. Ambulatory alert, minor smoke inhalation cough. No burns, no respiratory distress. Anran, you're a veteran firefighter. You know better than I do what a green tag means. Gu Anran's lips moved, but no words came out. Of course, she knew. The color code system for triage was something she had memorized in her first year on the job. Red meant critical. Yellow meant serious. Green meant minor or no injuries. A green tag like the one Zhou Tingshen did not need anyone to support him. Any firefighter knew that. There was smoke, Gu Anran said. Smoke affects judgment. The smoke affected your judgment, but not your feet. I said, Anran, I was on the floor of the east corridor. When your helmet light hit me, you stopped for a full 2 seconds. In those 2 seconds, you didn't see smoke. You saw me. Gu Anran's hands dropped to her sides. What were you thinking in those 2 seconds? Did you think he needed you more? Or did you think he was not worth the risk of letting me be saved? Wen Ce coughed beside me. The meaning of that cough was clear. Take it easy. You are still in the hospital. Do not send yourself back to the ICU from anger. I took a breath, pushed down the churning in my chest, picked up my phone, and pulled up a file. These are the authorization change documents I had Wen Ce draft for me. The first is the medical authorization change. You are no longer my emergency contact. The second is the change in authority over our joint accounts. All joint accounts, family credit cards, and vehicle usage rights under my name are now frozen. The third concerns your phone number's access to our home's smart lock and security system. I have remotely revoked your permissions. I turned the phone screen around so she could read it clearly. Gu Anran did not look at the screen. She looked at me. In her eyes was something I had never seen before. Not grievance. Not anger. Just a blankness, like something had slammed into her and she had not yet recovered.
You froze the credit cards?
She said. Her voice was very soft. It did not sound like an accusation. That's my primary card. I cancelled the supplementary card. But that payment account includes my mother's expenses for this month. Medical bills, right? I finished her sentence. Your mother's arthritis therapy expenses used to come out of our joint household account. This afternoon, I sorted out your mother's medical records and bills and sent them directly to her health insurance settlement platform. Any future expenses you and your family can figure out on your own. Gu Anran took half a step back. Wen Ce, she said, are you punishing my mother's legs to get back at me? I am not punishing your mother, I said, locking my phone and setting it aside. I am simply no longer supporting her on your behalf. If you think that's punishment, then maybe you should think about who has been carrying this burden for the past few years. She said nothing. Everything I said was true. Over the years, big or small, every matter in the Gu family, from her father's car upgrade to her mother's physical therapy, from her sister's overseas education to Zhou Tingshen's so-called community emergency consultant project funding, which one had I not covered? I was not silent about it. I spoke up many times. But she would always say, Tingshen's finances are tight right now, let's help him out. Or, my father's temper, or Wen Ce, don't be so petty. Don't be so petty. Those 3 words were what I heard the most during these 5 years of marriage. Now, don't be so petty had reached its limit. Wen Ce stood up, pulled a manila envelope from his briefcase, and handed it to Gu Anran. Anran. This is the official notice entrusted to me by Wen Ce. It contains detailed breakdowns of all the authorization changes I just mentioned. Also inside is a preliminary evidence preservation notice regarding tonight's fire. As an involved party and former family member, you have the right to see this notice. However, I advise you to inform your unit's legal department before reading it. When Gu Anran took the envelope, her fingers trembled slightly. You even did evidence preservation? She asked, looking at me. If I don't do it, will your unit do it for me? I replied. She did not answer. Just then, a voice came from the end of the hallway. Anran, where are you? Zhou Tingshen's voice. It carried a deliberate frailty, like someone dragging their voice when they have a cold. Gu Anran looked at me, then at the envelope in her hand. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I'll come back later, she said. Don't bother coming back, I said, leaning back on the pillow and closing my eyes. From now on, contact my lawyer for anything. She stood in the doorway. Even with my eyes closed, I could feel her staring at me. It was a look I once knew very well. When she came home late and I waited for her. When she was angry and I coaxed her. when she stood on a stage, searching the crowd for my seat. But now that look felt weightless to me, like something behind a pane of glass.
Gu.
Gu Anran turned and left. The sound of her high heels faded away. Zhou Tingshen's voice drifted from the hallway. "What's wrong? What did he say to you? Why do you look so upset?" Wen Ce gently shut the door and turned to look at me. When she said, "Don't be so petty just now," I almost lost my cool, he said. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. "But you kept it in." I kept it in. A lawyer is not allowed to punch people outside of court. I laughed. The laugh pulled at the injuries on my ribs, making me gasp in pain. But the pain felt solid and real, sharper than any anesthetic. "Tomorrow," I said, "put all the evidence together. The dispatch recordings, the triage records, my body cam footage, Zhou Tingshen's recording in the next room where he said, 'Write me a moderate diagnosis. Don't miss a single item.' And then, I said, sinking my head deeper into the pillow, we wait for them to finish their performance first." I knew Zhou Tingshen's habits. This man's biggest flaw was not that he was bad. It was that, after being bad, he still thought he was clever, thought his act was flawless. As soon as the sun rose, he would begin his performance. I only needed to sit in the audience with the recorder running. By daybreak, Wen Ce's team had already compiled the first round of evidence. I lay in the hospital bed. The bruises on my ribs still ached, but my mind was clearer than it had ever been. I did not touch the breakfast the nurse brought. Instead, I opened my laptop first and reviewed the files Wen Ce had sent over. 4 files. The first was the transcript of the dispatch recording. Gu Anran's walkie-talkie communication had been automatically recorded by the command center, time-stamped down to the second. At 9:18, I called in that I was trapped. At 9:19, Gu Anran replied to the command center, "East Corridor, no visual on other persons." Less than 40 seconds separated those two sentences. In those 40 seconds, she saw me, turned around, and went to pull out Zhou Tingshen. The second file was Zhou Tingshen's triage record. Green tag, minor injury, ambulatory, normal respiratory rate, blood oxygen saturation at 98%. The nurse who recorded it had added a note. "Patient complains of chest tightness, but vital signs do not support this." The third file was my body cam footage. It started as the smoke rose in the East Corridor, showed Gu Anran's helmet entering the frame, and ended when she turned and walked away. Every frame had a timestamp. Every timestamp aligned with the dispatch recording to the second. The fourth file was the recording of what Zhou Tingshen said to the doctor in the next room. I had recorded it with my phone through the curtain. The audio quality was not perfect, but his words, "Write me a diagnosis of moderate smoke inhalation," were perfectly clear. After reviewing these 4 files, I leaned back against the pillow and closed my eyes for a moment. Wen Ce was right. These materials were not just leverage for a divorce lawsuit. They interlocked, one piece biting into the next, firmly locking 2 things together. Gu Anran made a wrong choice in the fire, and then she used lies to wrap up that choice. Just then the door opened. It was not a nurse, nor Wen Ce. It was my assistant, Xiao Tang. She came in carrying a file box, dark circles under her eyes from staying up all night, but full of energy. "Engineer Wen, I have all the things you asked for sorted out," she said, placing the box on the chair beside my bed. All the inspection records from Qinghe Center over the past 2 years, the rectification notices, the email correspondence, and the purchase receipts for that batch of decorative wall panels that Zhou Tingshen submitted to the community office. All sorted by date. Labels are on them. "Thank you for your hard work," I said. "No trouble at all," Xiao Tang said, pulling up a chair and taking a folder from the box. "But you need to look at this. I think it is even more interesting than the wall panels." I opened the folder. Inside was a special fund application form that Zhou Tingshen had submitted to the Qingshan Subdistrict Office. It was titled Application for Special Funds for Community Emergency Culture Development. The amount requested was 360,000 yuan. The stated purpose was decoration upgrades and equipment supplement for the Community Safety Education Base. At the bottom, there was a line labeled Safety Compliance Reviewer, and my name was signed there. Wen Ce, 2 characters written with a fair imitation of my handwriting. I looked at those 2 characters and laughed. Not an amused laugh. It was the cold laugh of someone who had finally found a missing puzzle piece. I did not sign this, I said. I didn't think you did, Xiaotang said, pointing to a line of small text beneath the signature. Look at this date. March 12th. On that day, you were in the provincial capital attending an industry review meeting. Your high-speed train ticket and the meeting sign-in sheet are both in the company's reimbursement system. You were in the provincial capital. How could you come back here and sign for Zhou Tingshen? I closed the folder, picked up my phone, and called Wen Ce. Wen Ce, new discovery. Zhou Tingshen applied for 360,000 yuan in special funds, and my signature on the application form is forged. Furthermore, I have travel records proving I was not even in the city that day. There was silence on the other end for 3 seconds. With Wen Ce, the quieter he was, the more dangerous the situation. This is no longer just a civil case, he said. Forging a signature to fraudulently obtain public funds, at its worst, it is enough to trigger a criminal investigation. Send me your signature sample and travel records right now. I will go to the Economic Crimes Unit to file a report today. There is one more thing, I continued. This money came from the Qingshan Subdistrict's Special Account for Community Culture Development. Gu Anran's younger sister, Gu Anran, works there. Gu Anran. Wen Ce paused. Gu Anran's sister is named Gu Anran. Yes, Anran. She changed her name twice to try and distinguish herself from her sister. She probably goes by Gu Mingyue now, I said. She works in the sub-district office's cultural department, responsible for the initial review of community activity funds. Wen Ce let out a soft hum on the other end. This family really knows how to divide and conquer, he said. I hung up the phone. Xiaotang looked at me and asked quietly, Engineer Wen, are you okay? I'm fine, I said, flipping my phone face down. I'm just thinking about something. What is it? I'm thinking for the past few years, was I managing a marriage, or was I just acting as the chief financial officer for an entire family? Xiaotang did not reply. She had worked with me for 7 years and knew my temper. I was most dangerous when I was not angry, something she had once told other colleagues during a team outing. Her exact words were, Engineer Wen, not getting angry means he's busy filing things away. The real action starts after the filing is done. The filing was almost complete. At 2 in the afternoon, Wen Ce called for the 3rd time. Zhou Tingshen has made his move, he said. He posted something on his social media. It's a photo of himself in the hospital room, an IV line in his hand, with the cardiac monitor in the background. The caption reads, Having survived a brush with death, I am grateful to those who did not give up on me in the thick smoke. Hess already got over 200 likes. Let him post, I said. Are you sure? Hes warming up public opinion, trying to paint himself as a heroic fire survivor. Let him post, I repeated. The more he commits to the act, the sharper the contrast will be when we release our materials. Now check something for me. Under that post of his, did anyone from the sub-district office system like it? Wen Ce paused, then understood. You want to see if he has institutional backing? I'm not looking at him. I'm looking at Gu Anran, I said. Did Gu Mingyue like it? Wen Ce checked his phone on the other end. She did. She even shared it. With 3 heart emojis. Take a screenshot, I said. Already on it. After hanging up, I called Xiaotang over and told her to take screenshots of Zhou Tingshen's post and her sister's share, then print them out. Every printout was to be marked with the time and platform. Then cut a segment from my body cam footage, I said. Just 2 frames. The first frame, Gu Anran turns her head and sees me. The second frame, Gu Anran turns and runs toward Zhou Tingshen. Insert time codes showing the interval between them, jumping second by second. No text added, no music. Xiao Tang hesitated. Are we going public with this? Not yet, I said, closing my laptop. But I want the people who need to see it. First, send it to Qingshan Sub-District Emergency Management Office, the supervisory unit for Qinghe Center. Use my real name on the submission. Xiao Tang nodded and left with the file box. The hospital room fell quiet again. I picked up my phone and scrolled to my contacts. Gu Anran's profile picture was still the photo of the two of us taken at the seaside 2 years ago. We were standing on a reef with the sunset behind us. She wore a white dress, her hair blowing in the sea breeze, and she was smiling so wide her eyes curved like crescent moons. I looked at it for maybe 3 seconds. Then I swiped her chat window to the left and tapped mute notifications. The words appeared on the screen, and the light from the phone reflected on my face. I would not block her, at least not yet. The chat history contained too many of those work communications between her and Zhou Tingshen. Those messages were now lying in the evidence folder, serving as collateral proof of their tangled interests. But I did not have to look at her. Before I checked her profile picture many times a day, waiting for her to reply to me, waiting for her to tell me what time she would come home, waiting for her to say, Tingshen needs that payment advanced. Can you help him out? Now there was no need to wait. At 5:30 in the afternoon, Wen Ce came back. This time he brought an assistant. Both of them carried large document bags stuffed with printed files and evidence lists. The Qingshan Sub-District Emergency Management Office has replied, Wen Ce said, handing me a fax. They stated that Zhou Tingshen's 360,000 yuan allocation was approved based on your safety compliance signature. Now that you have formally reported the signature as forged, their office must launch an internal investigation. What about Gu Mingyue? I asked. She took annual leave today, Wen Ce said. Citing health reasons, I smirked. Health reasons. How many times had that excuse been used within the system? Every time something went wrong, suddenly someone had a stomachache, as if that could cover up the hand that signed the documents. By the way, one more thing. Wen Ce pulled another document from his bag. The insurance company for Qinghe Center has sent a letter. They have reviewed your video and believe the fire damage is directly linked to those unapproved decorative panels. According to the insurance terms, losses caused by using uncertified renovation materials can result in claim denial. In other words, the director of Qinghe Center is now preparing to go after Zhou Tingshen for these losses, using your video as evidence. How much? Equipment, renovations, and business interruption losses. Preliminary estimate is over 700,000 yuan. I read that letter twice. 700,000. Not a huge amount for a public institution, but for Zhou Tingshen personally, it was enough to cause serious trouble. His so-called community emergency consulting company had a registered capital of only 100,000 yuan, and probably less than 20,000 in the bank. He's about to realize he doesn't have enough money, I said. He already has, Wen Ce said, showing me a screenshot of a text message on his phone. It was from Zhou Tingshen to his company accountant. Transfer the money out of the company account immediately. Don't let the auditors find it. He sent this to the accountant by mistake, and the accountant couldn't keep it to himself and forwarded it to a peer in the industry. That peer happens to be a client of mine, Wen Ce said, his face expressionless, but I could see the glint in his eyes, the thrill of a lawyer realizing the opposing side had just handed him a gift. Can this text message be used? I asked. Of course, as long as it's an authentic communication record not obtained through illegal interception, it can be submitted as evidence. I leaned back against the headboard and looked up at the ceiling. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the blinds, painting stripes of light across the ceiling. Wen Ce, I said, what do you think Zhou Tingshen is most afraid of? Wen Ce thought for a moment. Losing his money. And what else? Losing his reputation. I nodded. Money and reputation. Those were the two things Zhou Tingshen cherished most in his life. He used Gu Anran's trust to gain money. He used my silence to prop up his reputation. Now I was going to take those things back, one by one. Not by force, not by theft, by settling accounts. One transaction at a time, clearly and thoroughly. "Rest well tonight," Wen Ce said, standing up and putting the documents back into his briefcase. "Tomorrow the first round of official notices will go out. Be prepared. The Gu family is going to explode." "I've been ready for a long time," I said. Wen Ce walked to the door, then turned back to look at me. "Wen Ce, there's one thing I've been wanting to ask you. When you were lying on the floor in that fire, your body cam pointed at Gu Anran for those dozens of seconds. What were you thinking?" I thought about it. I was thinking I didn't need to wait for her to come back. She never really came back in the first place. Wen Ce said nothing more and gently closed the door behind him. Outside the window, the sky darkened. The city lights turned on one by one. I picked up my phone and saw a message from Gu Anran that had popped up 15 minutes earlier. "Wen Ce, we need to talk." I looked at it for 3 seconds, then locked the screen. No need to talk. Everything that needed to be said, I had already said in that fire. Now, it was time for the evidence to do the talking. The call from the Gu family came the next morning. It was not from Gu Anran. It was from her father, Gu Guoliang. When the words father-in-law appeared on my phone screen, I was sitting in my hospital bed eating breakfast. I watched the name flash for a while before finally answering. "Wen Ce." Guoliang's voice was low, laced with barely suppressed anger. "Have you caused enough trouble?" I put down my spoon and wiped my mouth. "Uncle Gu, I'm not sure what you mean." "Don't call me uncle." Gu Guoliang paused.
You cancelled Anran's cards?
"You locked her out of her own home, and now you've got a lawyer to sue her?" "Wen Ce, did the smoke mess with your head?" "I am perfectly clear-headed," I said. "If you were clear-headed, you wouldn't be doing this." Gu Guoliang's voice suddenly shot up. "Anran is your wife. She was saving people in a fire, and you're stabbing her in the back. Do you have any sense of a man's responsibility?" I did not respond. I let him talk. "I'm calling you today because you've called me dad for 5 years," Gu Guoliang said, forcing his voice back down into a lecturing tone. "Come back for dinner tomorrow night. The family sits down together and talks things through. Whatever misunderstandings there are, let's sort them out face to face. Don't let outsiders laugh at us." Outsiders. He meant Wen Ce. I held the phone and looked out the window. The sun was bright, shining on the hospital parking lot, where rows of cars sat neatly lined up. A thought suddenly struck me. That black SUV Guoliang was driving now, I had paid the down payment for it 2 years ago. At the time, he said he wanted to take his wife on road trips after retirement. Gu Anran told me, "Just cover it for now. I'll pay you back when my year-end bonus comes in." Over 2 years had passed. The year-end bonus never appeared, but the monthly car loan payments kept getting deducted from my salary account. "Fine," I said. "I'll come over tomorrow night." After hanging up, I sent Wen Ce a message. Guoliang invited me to dinner at his place tomorrow night. "It's a trap." Wen Ce replied instantly with 3 words. "I'll go with you." I said, "No need. Wait for me outside. I'll start the recording before I go in." Wen Ce responded with a thumbs-up emoji. The next evening, I drove to the Gu family home. The neighborhood they lived in was one Gu Anran had picked out 6 years ago. She said it was close to her unit and close to her parents. I paid the down payment. I oversaw the renovation. Even the potted plants on the balcony were ones I had picked up from the flower market on weekends. Every time I visited my in-laws, I felt as comfortable as if I were in my own home. But not today. Today, I parked the car downstairs, turned off the engine, and sat there for 2 full minutes. Then I opened the recording app on my phone, locked the screen, slipped it into my coat pocket, and went upstairs. The door was opened by Gu Anran's younger sister, Gu Mingyue. She saw me and pulled the corner of her mouth upward into something that was not quite a smile. "Oh, the great engineer Wen has arrived. I didn't think you'd actually dare show up." Mingyue Guoliang barked from the living room. Gu Mingyue curled her lip and stepped aside. I walked in. The scene in the living room was just as I had anticipated. Gu Liang sat in the main single sofa, a cup of tea in front of him, his face as sour as a wrung-out rag. Gu Anran's mother, Lu Min, sat on the side sofa, clutching a tissue. Her eyes were red, though I could not tell if she had actually been crying or had come prepared. Gu Anran sat next to her mother, wearing civilian clothes, her hair loose and draped over her shoulders. When she saw me come in, her eyes flickered, then dropped down to stare at the teacup on the coffee table. The dining table was already set, 4 dishes and a soup. No one had touched any of it. "Sit," Gu Liang said, pointing to the chair opposite him. That chair sat alone, squarely facing the long sofa and 3 sour faces. I walked over and sat down, taking off my coat and draping it over the back of the chair. "Everyone's here," Gu Liang said, taking a sip of his tea. "Then let's begin." Lu Min was the first to speak. She clutched and twisted the tissue in her hands, her voice tearful. "Wen Ce, you're an educated man. How could you be so heartless? Anran is out there risking her life in fires, and you're behind her back, freezing her cards and hiring lawyers. What will people think of our family?" "Mom," Gu Anran gently tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Don't stop me. I have to get this off my chest today." Lu Min slapped the tissue onto the coffee table. "Wen Ce, I just want to ask you one question. Do you really insist on this divorce?" "Yes," I said. The air in the living room seemed to be compressed by that single word. Lu Min opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Gu Liang's teacup stopped halfway to his lips. Gu Mingyue leaned against the wall with her arms crossed and let out a short, cold laugh. "I told you so. You should have divorced him ages ago. What does a man who buries himself in blueprints all day know about feelings?" "Mingyue." Gu Anran's voice was heavier this time. "Fine, shut up." Gu Mingyue raised both hands, but her expression clearly said, "See, I told you so." Gu Liang slammed his teacup onto the coffee table with a heavy thud. "Wen Ce, I didn't ask you here today to fight. You and Anran have been together for so many years. Even if there's no passion left, there's still history. Is there nothing that can be settled by sitting down and talking it through? Does it have to end up in court?" I looked him in the eye. "Uncle Gu, what do you think my reason is for the divorce?" "Isn't it because Anran saved Tingshen first in that fire?" Gu Liang spread his hands. "Anran explained it to me. The smoke was too thick. She didn't see you. She ran into Tingshen first and pulled him out. That's a firefighter's professional instinct. Do you expect her to ignore someone collapsed at the doorway and search the whole building for you first?" "Exactly," Lu Min jumped in. "Anran told us that Tingshen had already passed out. He was unconscious. If she hadn't carried him out, he would have died in there. This isn't about choosing one person over another. It's about saving whoever you can." I looked at Gu Anran. Her head was lowered. Her hands rested on her knees, her 10 fingers tightly interlaced. She was not looking at her parents. She was not looking at me. "Anran," I said, "you told your parents that Zhou Tingshen was unconscious?" Gu Anran's shoulders stiffened. Tell them clearly what the real situation was." My voice was flat, so flat it even surprised me. Gu Liang frowned. "Anran?" Gu Anran slowly raised her head. Her eyes were bloodshot. Her lips were dry and peeling. She glanced at me, then turned to her father. Her voice was very soft. "Dad, at that moment, Tingshen was not unconscious. He was standing up." Those words landed on the coffee table like a rock hitting water. Lu Min froze. Gu Liang's frown deepened. Gu Mingyue, leaning against the wall, unconsciously straightened up. "Not unconscious," Gu Liang repeated. "You told us he was." "He was standing near the lobby exit. He could walk." "Gu," Anran's voice grew quieter. But he was shouting my name, very loudly, very urgently. At that moment, I thought his situation was more dangerous. So I took him out first. Lu Min's face changed, but she quickly recovered. So what? In a chaotic fire, who has time to make a perfect judgment? Anran is not a god. No, I said.
She's not a god.
She's just the captain of a fire squadron, professionally trained, someone who knows the difference between a green tag and a red tag. And Zhou Tingshen was not even a yellow tag. I pulled my phone from my coat pocket, opened the photo of his triage record, and turned the screen to face them. This is Zhou Tingshen's triage record when he arrived at the hospital. Green tag. That means he could walk, talk, breathe normally, and was fully conscious. He did not require priority treatment. Anran, tell me, in your 12 years on the force, when have you ever seen a green-tagged person need to be supported out of a fire by a firefighter? Gu Anran's lips trembled. She could not speak. Gu Liang stared at that screenshot for several seconds. He was not a doctor, but after 30 years as a civil servant, he knew exactly what an official triage report meant. He slowly turned his head toward Gu Anran. Anran, is this true? Gu Anran closed her eyes. Yes. That single word was even softer than her previous admission, but when it landed, no one in the living room could bear its weight. Lu Min's tissue dropped to the floor. But Wen Ce, Gu Anran opened her eyes, her voice finally beginning to tremble. I really did plan to take him out first and then come back for you. I didn't know the fire would spread that fast. I didn't know you would get hurt. I really didn't know. You didn't know? I said, looking at her. You were standing at the mouth of the corridor across from me. Your helmet light was shining on my face. You looked at me for 2 full seconds. In those 2 seconds, you knew perfectly well I was there. You just chose him? Lu Min shot to her feet. Enough! Wen Ce, stop bullying her here. Even if she made the wrong choice at that moment, it was a moment of confusion. You're a grown man and you're going to end your marriage over something like this. Mom, Gu Anran suddenly shouted. Not at me. At her mother. Lu Min was stunned by that shout. Gu Anran never raised her voice to her parents. This was the first time. Mom, don't say any more. Gu Anran covered her face with her hands, her voice squeezed out from between her fingers. Don't say any more. The living room fell silent for a few seconds. Then Gu Liang cleared his throat, lifted his teacup to drink, and realized the tea had gone cold. He set the cup back down and tapped his finger on the rim twice. Wen Ce, he said, even if Anran made a judgment error in that fire, that's a work matter. It has nothing to do with the problems between you two as husband and wife. Uncle Gu, I interrupted him, I didn't come here today to discuss judgment calls in the fire. The judgment part will be judged by your unit's disciplinary committee. I came here today to settle a few accounts.
What accounts?
Gu Liang's face darkened. I pulled a small notebook from my coat pocket. It was not a prop. I had prepared it yesterday in my hospital room. Printed it out, folded it twice. Every line was clearly written. First account, I said, opening the notebook. March, the year before last. You wanted to replace your car with that black SUV. Total price, 280,000 yuan. I paid the down payment of 84,000. Gu Anran said she would pay me back when her year-end bonus came in. To this day, that money has not been returned. I have the purchase contract and the transfer records. Gu Guoliang's mouth twitched. Second account. Last June, Aunt Lu had knee replacement surgery. The hospital fees plus rehabilitation therapy came to a total of 56,000 yuan. It was all paid through the family medical account under my name. I don't need you to repay this amount. However, from now on, all subsequent medical expenses are yours to handle. The relevant medical records and billing materials have already been transferred to the community health center. Lu Min's face turned pale. Third account, I flipped to the next page. December the year before last. Gu Mingyue applied for a management master's program in Singapore. The visa required proof of assets. Gu Anran asked me to deposit 200,000 yuan into Gu Mingyue's name as a guarantee. Mingyue, is that money still there? Gu Mingyue's expression changed drastically. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. If it is, please transfer it back to my account by next week, I said, closing the notebook. If it's not, well, see each other in court. Wen Ce! Gu Liang slammed his hand on the coffee table, making the teacup jump. Are you here to collect debts? Not to collect debts. I stood up and picked up my coat from the back of the chair. I'm just clearing up the messy accounts of the past 5 years in one go. The reason I didn't do it sooner is not because I didn't know. It's because I treated you as family. I looked at Gu Guoliang, at Lu Min, at Gu Mingyue shrinking against the wall, and finally rested my gaze on Gu Anran. You are no longer my family. I turned and walked toward the door. Wen Ce! Gu! Anran shouted from behind me, her voice breaking. Wait, just a moment, I did not stop. At the doorway, something suddenly occurred to me. I turned my head and glanced at the balcony. Those few potted plants were still in their original spots. The leaves had turned a bit yellow, as if no one had watered them in a long time. The door closed behind me. The hallway was very quiet. The elevator light blinked on and off. I pressed the button and waited for the metal doors to slide open. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a message from Wen Ce. How did it go? I leaned against the wall by the elevator and typed 3 words. Accounts are settled. The commendation ceremony was scheduled for Saturday evening in the banquet hall on the 3rd floor of the Junlin Hotel. I got the invitation from Wen Ce. To be precise, I did not exactly get it. He borrowed it from an acquaintance in the Municipal Emergency Management Bureau. The invitation was exquisitely made, with gold embossed lettering on a red cover and a line of large print. City Guardian's Annual Emergency Response Heroes Commendation Gala. Gu Anran's name was on the 3rd line. Zhou Tingshan's was on the 4th. They were supposed to receive the award together. It was called the Most Beautiful Act of Reversal Award, honoring their heroic deeds during the Qinghe Center fire, where they disregarded personal safety and bravely searched for and rescued trapped civilians. When Wen Ce handed me the invitation, he asked, "Are you really going?" "Yes," I said. "Won't it bother you?" "It would bother me more not to go." I opened the invitation and glanced at the program inside. It started at 7 in the evening. First, speeches by officials, then a short retrospective video about the Qinghe Center fire, then the award presentation, finally a speech by the award representative. The speaker was Gu Anran. "She's already prepared her speech," I said, closing the invitation and tossing it onto the table. Wen Ce leaned against the opposite side of my desk, arms crossed, watching me. "What's your plan? Are you going to stand up in the audience and yell she's lying? Or wait until she finishes and then grab the microphone? Do I look like someone with so little self-control?" "No," Wen Ce said. "But you've been preparing evidence for so long. It needs an outlet. Unless you plan on framing those materials and hanging them on your wall for your own amusement." I did not answer him. I opened my laptop and clicked on a folder. Inside were all the materials I had collected over the past 2 weeks, the raw body cam footage, the transcript and timeline of the dispatch recording, Zhou Tingshan's triage records and hospital recording, his forged signature on the special fund application, Gu Mingyue's reposts and screenshots, the bank records of that 360,000 yuan arriving in Zhou Tingshan's account, Gu Guoliang's SUV purchase contract, and repayment records. "Wen Ce," I said, "do something for me. Tell me. Contact a few media reporters who will be at the event. Not too many, just 2 or 3. The kind who cover social news, who know their stuff and aren't afraid of trouble." Wen Ce looked at me, and the corner of his mouth slowly lifted. "You want to release the materials right there at the ceremony? I'm not the one releasing them." I turned my laptop screen around so he could see a document on it. The supervisory unit for Qinghe Center has already officially archived my video as evidence. That means this footage is now a publicly accessible official record, not a personal malicious leak by me. If someone, say a reporter in the audience, just happens to look up this record right before the ceremony begins, and then decides to ask the organizers some questions after the event. What does that have to do with me? Wen Ce listened, leaned back in his chair, and laughed. Wen Ce, he said, it's a real loss to the legal profession that you didn't become a lawyer. Saturday evening, 7 o'clock. The banquet hall of the Junlin Hotel. I wore a dark blue suit and sat at an inconspicuous table in the back corner. This table was far from the main table, close to the back door. I had chosen it on purpose. Around 200 people filled the banquet hall. The front rows were city leaders and officials from the emergency response system. The middle rows were representatives from various district fire brigades. The back rows were community figures and the media. Everyone was dressed formally, wearing small red silk flowers pinned to their chests, as if attending a wedding. On the large screen on stage, a music video played on a loop. It was the rescue documentary of the Qinghai Center fire, thick smoke billowing, fire trucks racing in, firefighters moving in and out of the flames. The background music was the standard heroic symphony, heavy drum beats and surging strings, instantly stirring the blood. I studied those images carefully. Every shot cleverly avoided the East Corridor. All the narration avoided any mention of the specific number or locations of trapped persons. The whole video gave the impression that in that fire, all trapped individuals had been rescued in time with no omissions, no mistakes. Beautifully made, the person next to me sighed. He was a sub-district official in his 40s, his eyes glued to the screen, deeply moved. It really is, I said. At 7:10, the host took the stage. The opening speech was a long stream of phrases like saluting the heroes, promoting righteousness, and stepping forward in times of crisis. Then a city leader gave a speech for another 10 minutes. After that, the big screen lit up again, this time playing a special VCR produced for the award recipients. Gu Anran appeared on the screen. She was wearing her fire service uniform, standing in front of a fire truck, saying to the camera, as a firefighter, protecting the safety of the people is our sacred duty. The video cut to the training ground, where she was running with a water hose on her shoulder, then to a fire scene, where she was directing her crew, then to a group photo, where she stood shoulder to shoulder with her team, smiling brightly. A segment of the VCR was dedicated to interviewing a representative of the rescued civilians. Zhou Tingshen appeared on screen, wearing a white shirt, his expression sincere. If it weren't for Anran that day, he said, his voice trembling slightly with emotion, I wouldn't be sitting here. I had already lost consciousness from the smoke inhalation. Anran disregarded her own safety and carried me out of the fire on her back. She is not just my lifesaver. She is a true hero of this city. Applause broke out in the audience. The sub-district official next to me wiped his glasses again. So touching, he said. It really is, I said. The host stepped up, raising his voice by an octave. Now, let's welcome with the warmest applause the recipients of the most beautiful act of reversal award, Captain Gu Anran of the Municipal Fire Brigade Qingshan Squadron, and the representative of rescued civilians, Community Emergency Volunteer Mr. Zhou Tingshen. The spotlight swung to the main table. Gu Anran stood up. She was wearing her crisp blue ceremonial uniform, the bars on her epaulets gleaming under the lights. Her hair was pulled into a neat bun, and she wore light makeup. As she stood, over 200 pairs of eyes in the hall watched her. She took a deep breath and walked toward the stage. Zhou Tingshen followed behind, also in a suit, walking with an unhurried stride, as if on a red carpet. He even smiled at a nearby camera. They stood side by side on the stage. The host handed over the microphone. The deputy director of the Municipal Emergency Management Bureau personally presented the award, a crystal trophy, engraved with the words, Most Beautiful Reversal on the base. The leader handed the trophy to Gu Anran, shook her hand and said, Thank you for your hard work, hero of the people. Then he shook Zhou Tingshen's hand and said the same thing. Camera flashes went off like a storm. Now, the host said, Please welcome award representative Comrade Gu Anran to deliver her acceptance speech. Gu Anran took the microphone. She stood at the podium facing over 200 pairs of eyes and cleared her throat. Standing on this stage, she began, "My heart is filled with mixed emotions." The room fell silent. As a firefighter, I have faced countless fires. Every single time I tell myself I must bring every life out safely. This is my duty and my belief. Her voice was steady, full of emotion. People in the audience began nodding. The fire at Qinghe Center came suddenly and burned fiercely. As I groped my way forward through the thick smoke, I had only one thought in my mind. There are still people inside. I must find them. The sub-district official next to me wiped his eyes again. Later, I found Mr. Zhou Tingshen. At that point, he had already lost consciousness from the smoke and was in critical condition. I helped him out of the fire and handed him over to the waiting crew. Thankfully, his injuries were not severe, and he recovered quickly. Gu Anran paused here. Her gaze swept across the audience, reaching the back rows. It landed on the table where I was sitting. Her voice caught. Just for a split second, I sat in the corner. The lights did not reach my face, but she saw me. I saw it clearly. Her fingers around the microphone suddenly tightened. She pulled her gaze back and continued. That night, I made the choice that a firefighter should make at that moment. I did not hesitate. I do not regret it, because I firmly believe. Right at that moment, a wave of phone notifications began ringing across the audience. Not one or two, but many. Like a digital rain shower pattering down across the entire banquet hall. A leader in the front row frowned and looked down at his phone. A journalist at a nearby table snatched up her phone, her eyes widening. Then she abruptly looked up at Gu Anran on the stage. Gu Anran's words broke off, because... She tried to continue, but the murmuring in the audience grew louder and louder, drowning out the sound of the microphone. The sub-district official next to me also looked down at his phone. On the screen was a breaking news alert. The headline read, "Exclusive, Qinghe, fire rescue footage leaked. Award recipient accused of missing trapped person." Below the headline was a video cover image, a helmet light cutting through thick smoke, and in the smoke the outline of a person lying on the floor. He tapped the video. My voice came out of his phone speaker. In the rising tide of notification sounds in the banquet hall, in that space that had been quiet a moment ago and was now filled with whispers, it rang out clearly. Anran in the video. Gu Anran's head turned. In the video, she looked at me for 2 seconds. In the video, she turned and ran toward Zhou Tingshen. Then the dispatch recording followed immediately. East corridor, no visual on other persons. The sub-district official turned his head sharply to look at me, his mouth wide open. I placed my index finger to my lips and gave him a small smile. On stage, the color drained from Gu Anran's face beneath her makeup. She stood at the podium, the microphone still raised to her lips, but no words came out. She turned to look at Zhou Tingshen. He stood 2 steps behind her, that red carpet smile still frozen on his lips, but his eyes were darting left and right, like a bird that had suddenly realized the cage door was closing. Someone in the audience stood up. It was the deputy director of the Municipal Emergency Management Bureau. Holding his phone, his face livid, he strode to the organizer's table and whispered something. The host stood frozen at the side of the stage, clutching the program card, completely unsure of what to do next. And then, the big screen suddenly lit up. It was not the VCR. It was not the event background. It was a web page, the live feed of a news website. In their panic, the backstage staff had probably clicked the wrong window and projected their work computer screen onto the main display. The headline on the web page was visible to everyone. Rescued person's triage record shows minor injuries. Fire captain claimed he was unconscious. Below it was a photo of Zhou Tingshen standing in the hospital hallway, talking on the phone. The timestamp was the day after the fire. The entire hall erupted. It was an eruption of shock that had been suppressed for too long and had finally found a vent. Some people stood up to take photos. Some shouted questions to their neighbors. Journalists rushed to the front of the stage, holding out their audio recorders and yelling, "Captain Gu, can you respond to this?" Gu Anran stood behind the microphone. Her hands gripped the edge of the podium, her knuckles white as paper. She looked at the chaos in the audience, at the leader's livid face, at the recorders thrust toward her by the reporters, at Zhou Tingshen's heels backing away. Then she looked at me again. This time I did not avoid her gaze. I sat in the corner, out of the spotlight, but she could see me. I raised my water glass and tilted it toward her from a distance. It was not a toast. It was not a salute. It was a silent acknowledgement. The kind that said, "I told you so." Her lips quivered. Then she turned and hurried down the side steps of the stage. Her high heels hit the steps, and she stumbled, nearly falling. No one helped her. Zhou Tingshen followed behind, reaching out to grab her arm. She shook him off fiercely. The lights in the banquet hall were blindingly bright, illuminating every face with perfect clarity. Some people were angry, some were confused, some were thrilled, some were gloating. I stood up, buttoned my suit jacket, and walked out the back door. The hallway was quiet, the carpet swallowing my footsteps. The noise from the banquet hall behind me was muffled, like a distant storm. As the elevator doors opened, Wen Ce's call came in. "You left?" he asked. I left. "Did anyone get a shot of your reaction?" "No," I said. "I was in the back row." The lights were off. Everyone was too busy looking at their phones to notice me. Wen Ce laughed on the other end. "How did it feel?" I thought about it. The scene just now replayed in my mind, the news headline on the big screen, the rising murmur of the audience, the deputy director's livid face, Gu Anran's frozen fingers on the podium, Zhou Tingshen's retreating steps, and her shaking off his hand as she stumbled off stage. "Not bad," I said. "Not bad?" Wen Ce's voice rose half a pitch. "I thought you'd say satisfying." I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the ground floor. The elevator doors slowly closed, slicing the crystal chandelier in the hallway into a vertical line, then shutting it off completely. "Satisfaction is for later," I said. Today it was her glory that died. 3 days after the commendation ceremony, Zhou Tingshen appeared on the news. Not the kind of news that praises heroes. It was a brief notice issued by the Municipal Commission for Discipline Inspection. After preliminary verification, it has been found that in the procurement of decorative wall panels for the Qinghe Youth Activity Center, community emergency volunteer Zhou Momo is suspected of forging another person's signature and fraudulently obtaining special financial funds. Relevant leads have been transferred to the public security authorities for legal processing. Zhou Momo. They did not even write out his full name, but everyone knew exactly who it was. When Wen Ce forwarded the notice to me, I was in my office with Xiao Tang, reviewing the inspection plan for a new project. I clicked the link, read it through, put my phone back on the desk, and continued looking at the blueprints. "You're not even a little excited?" Xiao Tang could not help asking. "This is just the beginning," I said. My judgment was correct. That same afternoon, news spread that Zhou Tingshen had been taken in by the Economic Crimes Unit to assist with the investigation. Apparently, he had gone in voluntarily, thinking he would just give a statement and be back, not even bringing a change of clothes. But once inside, the investigators placed the forged signature application form on the table, pulled out the bank records of the 360,000 yuan flowing into his company account, and asked him 3 questions. Did he forge the signature? Where did the money go? Did he have any accomplices? Zhou Tingshen panicked. The biggest mistake people make when they panic is pushing others out as a shield. Zhou Tingshen, deep in his bones, had no idea what responsibility meant. The thing he was best at his whole life was standing under the brightest spotlight when the wind was at his back, and pushing those closest to him to the front when the wind turned. This time, the person he pushed was Gu Anran. Early the next morning, Wen Ce called me. "I have something to tell you," he said. His voice carried the practiced restraint of a lawyer, but I could hear the excitement beneath it. Zhou Tingshen gave some testimony while in custody. He said Gu Anran approved the purchase of those unapproved decorative panels. He said she told him at the time, ignore Wen Ce's inspection report. Just get the event done first. He also claimed Gu Anran helped push through that 360,000 yuan grant, telling Gu Mingyue to expedite it on the sub-district office's side. Does he have evidence? None. It's all just his word. But there is something else he admitted to that does have evidence. Wen Ce paused. He said on the night of the Qinghe Center fire, after Gu Anran took him out of the fire, the two of them discussed how to write the incident report. It was Gu Anran herself who decided to put no visual on other persons into the report. I held the phone in silence. The hallway was quiet, which means Wen Ce continued. Zhou Tingshen is claiming that Gu Anran told him to write that false report. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the light on the ceiling. The tube light buzzed softly, like a fly trapped in a glass cover. Are you surprised? Wen Ce asked. Not at all, I said. I've known Zhou Tingshen would pull something like this for a long time. He just chose the moment he thought was most convenient. What are you going to do? Should we release the evidence against Gu Anran as well? I thought for a moment. No. Let her handle it herself. It was not out of softness. I simply knew Gu Anran better than Zhou Tingshen did. That woman had a core of iron running through her, and she could not stand being used as a tool. The moment Zhou Tingshen threw mud at her, the string that had stretched taut between them for over 10 years was bound to snap. Sure enough, that evening, Gu Anran's call came through to Wen Ce. She says she wants to provide a supplementary statement regarding Zhou Tingshen. Wen Ce told me over the phone. It includes things Zhou Tingshen said to her on the night of the fire and the whole backstory behind the procurement of those decorative panels. She says she is willing to sign, provide a thumbprint, and fully cooperate with any investigation. Did she set any conditions? One, Wen Ce said. She asked if she could see you. I looked out the window. Night had fallen, and the city lights sparkled like scattered gold. No, I said. Understood. But if that statement is useful for the case, take it. Already in the process. I hung up and stood by the window watching the streams of red taillights flowing on the road below. I could not describe exactly how I felt. Not satisfaction, not sadness. It was more like watching a movie whose ending you already knew, and now it was finally reaching the last 10 minutes before the credits rolled. After Gu Anran submitted her supplementary statement, the Municipal Emergency Management Bureau acted faster than I had anticipated. Within 3 days, they formed a special investigation team and officially opened a case against the falsified incident report from the Qinghe Center fire. Gu Anran was suspended from all duties pending the investigation outcome. Zhou Tingshen's case moved from the Economic Crimes Unit to the Criminal Investigation Unit. The amount involved expanded from the 360,000 yuan to all the grants he had received through community projects over the past 2 years. A preliminary estimate put it at over 600,000 yuan. His company account was frozen, his only car was seized, even his rented office was sealed. What truly broke him happened on the 3rd day. The Qingshan Sub-District Office formally filed a civil lawsuit against Zhou Tingshen, demanding the return of all fraudulently obtained funds, plus compensation for the fire damage exacerbated by the non-compliant decorative panels. Qinghe Center's insurance company followed suit with a subrogation claim. Together, the two claims amounted to nearly 1.4 million yuan. Zhou Tingshen sent one final message in his company's group chat. Someone took a screenshot and forwarded it around, eventually reaching me. His exact words were, "This is all Gu Anran's fault. If she hadn't put me in charge of this project, how would I have ended up in this mess?" When I read that, I let out a short laugh. Not out of joy. I genuinely found it absurd. This was a man who, from the very first day he met me, had put on the air of someone who understood her better than you. He would serve her food at dinner. When he drank too much, he would drape his arm over her shoulder. He would whisper in her ear. He saw himself as her guardian, the man who would always be there behind her, no matter who she chose. Now, standing at the edge of a cliff, his first instinct was to push her off. I sent Wen Ce a message. Submit the original forged signature document to the court tomorrow. Wen Ce replied instantly, "You want to put him away for good." Him just handing over all the evidence, I typed steadily. He is the one putting himself away. Throughout this period, the Gu family went completely silent. Gu Liang did not call me again. Lu Min did not send any more of those roundabout text messages. Gu Mingyue even set her social media to only show posts from the last 3 days. I did not know what was happening within their family, nor did I want to know. Only once, Wen Ce casually mentioned to me, Gu Guoliang sold that SUV and bought a second-hand sedan. I gave a non-committal and kept reading the document in my hand. I felt nothing. That car, that down payment, were all pages I had already turned. About a week later, one afternoon, I was leaving the courthouse after a routine procedural hearing. The sky was overcast, the clouds hanging low, the air thick with the earthy smell of impending rain. Standing at the bottom of the courthouse steps was a woman. It was Gu Anran. She had lost a lot of weight. Not the deliberate kind from dieting. It was as if something had hollowed her out from the inside. Her cheekbones were prominent, her chin sharp. The trench coat that used to fit her perfectly now hung loosely on her shoulders. She wore no makeup. Her hair was simply tied back. In her hand, she carried a canvas tote bag. Standing in the wind, she looked like a tree that had been bent by a storm. She saw me coming down the steps. Her lips moved. She stepped forward half a pace, then stopped. "Wen Ce," she said. I stopped and looked at her. "I'm not here to ask for your forgiveness." These were her first words, and it sounded as if she had rehearsed them many times in her head. I know I don't have the right to say that. I said nothing. I just came to tell you something. She hitched the canvas bag higher on her shoulder, her fingers clutching the strap so tightly they turned white. "The night you walked out of our family's house, my father yelled at me for a long time. He asked why I didn't tell him earlier that Tingshen was faking it. I told him it wasn't just Tingshen, it was me. I was the one who didn't want to admit I had made the wrong choice. All those years, you carried so many things for me, and I never once said thank you. I always felt it was what you were supposed to do. You were my husband. You were supposed to bear it for me." Her voice began to shake. "It wasn't until you left that I realized that was wrong. There is no supposed to. You carried it because you were willing to. Now that you're not willing anymore, I have no right to blame you." A low rumble of thunder rolled across the sky. The earthy smell in the air grew stronger. It was about to rain. "I've told the investigation team everything." The report, Tingshen's forged signatures, Mingyue's handling of those funds. I don't know what the final outcome will be, but I won't cover for anyone anymore. She paused and looked me in the eye. "Wen Ce, I've always owed you one sentence. I waited. When you were lying on that floor, I should not have walked away." After she finished that sentence, her tears finally fell. Not loud, heaving sobs. They just streamed down silently, from her cheeks to her chin, dripping onto the canvas bag and spreading into a small, dark stain. I watched her cry. In the past, seeing her tears would have made my heart clench. Now, there was none of that feeling. Her tears were real. The words she spoke were real. It was just that all of it had come too late. "Thank you for telling me this," I said. "But Anran, some roads once walked cannot be retraced. What you can do is walk the road ahead well." She wiped the tears from her face and nodded. I know we can't go back." The raindrops began to fall. A few at first, then dark spots dotted the steps. "Do you have an umbrella?" I asked. "Yes," she said, pulling a folding umbrella from her canvas bag. "That's good, then." I took my own umbrella out of my briefcase, opened it, walked down the steps, and headed toward the parking lot. I had walked about a dozen steps when Gu Anran called out behind me. "Wen Ce." I paused. "Take care of yourself," she said. The rain was falling harder now, drumming loudly on the umbrella. I did not look back. I kept walking. The rain curtain enveloped the entire street, blurring the courthouse steps behind me, blurring the person standing on those steps. I got into my car and started the engine. The windshield wipers began their rhythmic back and forth, pushing the rain away and clearing a sharp view ahead. My phone rang. It was Wen Ce. The court called. Zhou Tingshan's trial is set for next month. As the victim of the forged signature, you will need to testify. No problem, I said. One more thing. Wen Ce's tone suddenly became lighter. I received a very interesting package today. Guess what it is?
What?
A check sent by Gu Anran for 84,000 yuan. The windshield wipers continued their steady swing. I gripped the steering wheel and looked out at the city being washed by the rain. Did he write anything in the memo? I asked. He did. 2 words. What did they say? Repaying your money. I put the car in gear, released the brake, and the car slowly rolled out of the parking lot and onto the rain-swept street. In the rearview mirror, the shape of the courthouse grew smaller and smaller, more and more blurred, until it finally dissolved into the grey curtain of rain. 84,000 yuan. For Gu Anran, this was the last account between him and his son-in-law. Once it was paid, everything was cleared. But what he did not know was that some debts cannot be settled with money. The only thing he could repay was the money. What he could not repay were those 5 years. My trust. That 2-second glance in the east corridor. Those things no one could repay, and they no longer needed to be. The day I signed the divorce agreement was a Wednesday. There was no courtroom drama, no heated confrontation, no scene of 2 sides hurling accusations at each other as seen in TV dramas. It was an uncontested divorce by agreement, signed in the conference room of a law firm next to the Civil Affairs Bureau. Wen Ce arrived an hour early. He spread out the agreement documents one by one on the table and checked them against the table of contents. This was how he did things. He would not overlook even a single punctuation mark. Review the property division section again, he said, pushing 1 copy toward me. Especially the clause about your company equity. Gu Anran previously raised the point that she had a right to claim a share of the appreciation in value of your company during the marriage. I sent her a letter in response, attaching your prenuptial property agreement. Her side hasn't made a sound since. I picked up the agreement and flipped through it. Every clause was written clearly, with no grey areas. The apartment was mine. The car was hers, not the SUV, but the red sedan under her own name. Company equity, savings, investment accounts, all were handled according to the prenuptial agreement. There was no alimony. No emotional damages. No loose ends. Has she signed yet? I asked. Not yet. Her people said she'd be here today. Wen Ce checked his watch. 10 o'clock. 5 more minutes. The sound of the elevator arriving came from outside the conference room, followed by footsteps. The footsteps paused for 2 seconds outside the door, then the door was pushed open. Gu Anran walked. She wore a dark blue blouse, the collar neatly pressed. Her hair was cut shorter, just above the ears, making her whole frame look even thinner. Behind her was a middle-aged woman in black-rimmed glasses, carrying a large briefcase. That was her lawyer. Mr. Wen, lawyer Jin. The opposing lawyer nodded in greeting, perfectly professional, without any unnecessary expression. Gu Anran sat down opposite me. The conference table was wide. About 2 meters separated us. This 2-meter distance had once been the length of our dinner table, where we had sat facing each other for 5 years of meals. Now the table was covered in legal documents, every page lined with cold numbered clauses. You've both reviewed the agreement terms, Wen Ce began. Wen Ce's position is to keep the existing terms as they are. If Miss Gu has no objections, we can complete the signing today. After signing according to the law, there is a 30-day cooling-off period. After that, both parties will go to the Civil Affairs Bureau to collect the divorce certificate. The opposing lawyer pushed her glasses up. Miss Gu has one request. Wen Ce raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Regarding the subsequent investigation into the Qinghe Center fire, the lawyer said, opening a folder, Ms. Gu hopes to add a clause to the divorce agreement, clarifying that after the divorce, both parties will not publicly blame each other regarding this matter. In other words, Mr. Wen will not publicly release that video footage, and Ms. Gu will not make any statements unfavorable to Miss Wen regarding this matter. The conference room was silent for a few seconds. Then I said no. The opposing lawyer froze. Gu Anran looked up at me as well. The footage is already being used as evidence in an investigation, I said. It is not my personal belonging. It is part of an official record. I do not have the right to promise it will not be made public. Besides, the clause you propose is essentially asking to let the past rot in an archive. It won't rot. The investigation team is pursuing it. The insurance companies are pursuing it. The court is reviewing it. I cannot control all of that alone. I looked at Gu Anran. You should know that better than I do. Gu Anran lowered her head. Her finger traced an invisible speck of dust on the table. Fine, she said. We withdraw that request. She reached out and picked up the pen on the table, pulling off the cap. Her fingers were shaking so badly that the pen tip hovered over the paper for several seconds before she could put it down. She signed the first page, flipped it over, and signed the second. Every page was signed slowly, as if she were writing a very long name. When she reached the final signature page, her hand stopped. Wen Ce, she said my name without looking up, her eyes fixed on the paper. Once I sign this, we will be strangers. I said nothing. You won't answer my calls anymore, will you? She said. Well, cross that bridge when we come to it, I said. Her pen tip paused on the paper, then continued downward. She finished the horizontal stroke of her surname, the dot of her given name. The 4 dots at the bottom of her last character took her the longest time. When she finished, she put the pen down and pushed the agreement across the table. I picked it up, flipped to the final signature page, and looked at her signature. In the past, her signature strokes were connected, 3 characters written in one fluid motion, very dashing. Today, the 3 characters were separate, stroke by stroke, like a primary school student practicing calligraphy. I uncapped my own pen and signed the 2 characters Wen Ce next to her name. I wrote them decisively. After signing, I passed the agreement to Wen Ce. Wen Ce checked the signatures and dates, then stamped it with the law firm's witnessing seal. The agreement is in effect, he said. Those 4 words landed on the table like a full stop. Gu Anran's lawyer collected her copy of the agreement, tucked it into her briefcase, stood up, shook hands with Wen Ce, and left the conference room. Gu Anran remained seated. Her hands rested on her knees, her fingers clutching that canvas bag so tightly her knuckles were white. Can I say a few words to you? She asked. Just a few. No lawyers present. Wen Ce looked at me. I nodded. He gathered his documents, gave Gu Anran a slight nod, and walked out, closing the door behind him. Only the 2 of us were left in the conference room. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating every tiny speck of dust on the table with perfect clarity. Zhou Tingshen's case has been decided, Gu Anran said. I already knew this. 2 days earlier, someone from the Economic Crimes Unit had called Wen Ce to say that Zhou Tingshen was almost certainly facing actual prison time, a minimum of 2 years. The civil side had also ruled against him for over 700,000 yuan in compensation. Everything under his name had been frozen and auctioned off. His parents had sold their old family house to help pay him back, and it was still not enough to cover half. But that was not what Gu Anran wanted to talk about. During the trial, she continued, he told the judge right to my face that I orchestrated everything. That I told him to buy those unapproved panels. That I forced him to write the false report. That I told him to apply for that 360,000 yuan grant. He said he was just the executor and I was the real decision-maker. She placed the canvas bag on the table, her fingers releasing and clenching again. The investigation team cross-referenced his testimony with my statement. Combined with your audio evidence and the financial flow of funds, they ultimately ruled that most of his accusations were unfounded. But there was one thing he said that was true, that report. Her voice dropped lower. That report that said no visual on other persons, I was the one who told him to write it. I know, I said. You know? She looked up, her eyes already red. You knew all along? I read your supplementary statement, I said. She froze, then slowly buried her face in her hands. Then why don't you hate me? Her voice came out muffled from between her fingers. You should hate me. You should yell at me. You should be like everyone else, shouting liar at me. I looked at her. Her shoulders were shaking. Her hair had slipped from behind her ear and covered half her face. This woman had once commanded a fire scene with unshakable authority. She had once stood radiant on a podium, time and again, in our arguments. She had made me feel that I was the one being unreasonable. Now she sat here, asking me why I did not hate her. Hating you takes energy too, I said, and my energy is no longer something I want to spend on you. She lowered her hands and looked at me. Tears streamed down her nose. She did not wipe them away. What do you plan to do from now on? I asked her. The question seemed to catch her off guard. I don't know. She wiped her face messily with the back of her hand. The investigation team's final conclusion hasn't come out yet, but I'm already prepared to be dismissed. If that happens, I plan to go to the Southern New District and teach first aid courses at a training school. It's developing fast there, lots of migrant workers. They should need training instructors. That's not bad, I said. She nodded, forcing a twitch at the corner of her mouth, as if she wanted to smile but could not quite manage it. And you? She asked. The company has moved to the East District. We've taken on several new projects. After the new year, I plan to go to our Singapore branch for half a year to develop the Southeast Asian market. That's good, she said. Then she stood up, slung the canvas bag over her shoulder, and stood there for a moment, as if she wanted to say something. But in the end, she only said then, "I'll go now." Go ahead, I said, standing up as well. She walked to the door, her hand on the handle, and turned back to look at me one last time. Wen Ce. Yes. In the days ahead, take good care of yourself. You too. The door handle turned. The door opened. The light from the hallway flooded in, casting her thin figure into a long, stretched shadow. The door closed softly. Her footsteps echoed down the hallway, growing fainter and fainter until they were swallowed by the sound of the elevator doors closing. I sat in the empty conference room, looking at the signed agreement on the table. The sunlight fell on the paper, illuminating both our signatures with perfect clarity. 2 characters, 3 characters, sitting next to each other, yet so far apart. Wen Ce pushed the door open. She's gone? Gone. She cried in the hallway for a while, he said. I didn't feel right rushing her. I put the agreement into a document envelope and stood up. Let's go. I have a project to discuss this afternoon. Don't you want to rest? No need. I walked out of the conference room. Passing the hallway window, I glanced down at the street below. A red sedan was parked by the curb. It was old, with a crack on one of the tail-light covers. Gu Anran was pulling open the driver's side door and bending down to get she started the engine. The tail-lights flashed once and then the car slowly merged into the flow of traffic. The red sedan drove farther and farther away, eventually shrinking into a red dot that disappeared around the corner of the intersection. I pulled my gaze back and stepped into the elevator. 30 days later, the cooling-off period ended. Gu Anran and I collected our divorce certificates at the Civil Affairs Bureau window. She wore a white blouse that day. I wore a blue jacket. While waiting in line, she stood 3 steps behind me, but neither of us spoke. The clerk handed out 2 green-covered certificates. She took one. I took the other. Walking out the door of the Civil Affairs Bureau, she gave me a slight nod, then turned and walked east. I stood on the steps and opened my divorce certificate for a brief look. The 2 people in the ID photo sat side by side, separated by a perforated seal down the middle. The sunlight fell on the document, and the indentation of that embossed seal was clear and firm, like a newly built wall. I closed the certificate, put it in my pocket, and walked west. Passing a real estate agency, I noticed the colorful property listings plastered across the glass window. In the very center was a large advertisement with a bold slogan, "A new life starts with a good home." I looked at those words and smiled. A new life did not necessarily have to start with a house. It could start with a divorce certificate. It could start with a corridor where the smoke had finally cleared. It could start with you finally admitting that some people enter your life not to accompany you to the end, but to teach you one thing. What thing? That you deserve to be treated seriously. If others won't do it, then you must do it yourself. I put my hands in my pockets, faced the sunlight, and walked far away. 6 months is neither a long time nor a short time. Long enough for me to move the company to a new office in the East District, expand the business line from safety inspections to emergency training, and secure community safety service contracts with 3 sub-districts. Long enough for the Qinghe Center to finish its renovation, replace everything with compliant fireproof materials, pass its re-inspection, and officially reopen. And short enough that some things still felt like they happened yesterday. On the day the Qinghe Center reopened, I was invited to attend a simple ribbon-cutting ceremony. Not as the victim's family member, but as a safety consultant. The new director was a man named Zheng, an old sub-district official in his 50s, a straightforward and methodical person. When he came to our company to discuss cooperation, his first words were, "Engineer Wen, our sub-district office bears responsibility for what happened before. From now on, all safety compliance will be done to your standards." I said, "If we follow my standards, your budget might increase by 20%. He said, "Do it. If I don't spend this money now, what I could lose later will be far more than 20%. It is always a pleasure to talk with sensible people. After signing the contract, I took Xiao Tang to do 3 comprehensive inspections at the Qinghe Center. The East Corridor had been laid with new fireproof flooring. The walls were now covered with Class A fire-resistant materials. The stairwell where I had been trapped was equipped with an independent smoke exhaust system and emergency lighting. I stood in the middle of that corridor. The lights overhead were bright and steady. There was no more thick smoke or darkness. The walls were painted a fresh cream color, clean and spotless, showing no trace of ever having been burned. But I knew what lay behind that wall. Just like some wounds, the surface heals, but the scar remains. Many people attended the ribbon cutting. Leaders from the sub-district office, community representatives, heads of several sponsoring companies, and 2 or 3 local media outlets. Director Zheng gave a speech on stage, saying the reconstruction of Qinghe Center was the result of the joint efforts of many parties, and he especially thanked Wen Ce Safety Consulting for its professional support. The audience applauded. I stood up and nodded, then sat back down. After the ceremony, I was standing at the entrance with Director Zheng, discussing follow-up maintenance matters, when out of the corner of my eye I caught a figure. Outside the gate, across the narrow pedestrian walkway, stood a woman. She wore a grey trench coat. Her hair was longer than the last time I had seen her, now reaching her shoulders. She carried no canvas bag. Her hands were empty. She just stood there, not coming in, not leaving, like a tree blown to the side of the road and unable to move any further. It was Gu Anran. Director Zheng followed my gaze, recognized her, and let out a soft sigh. He patted me on the shoulder, said, "You take care of this," and walked away. I hesitated for 2 seconds. Not about whether to go over, but about what to say when I did. Then I started walking toward her. Up close, I could see that her state was calmer than I had imagined. Not the forced calm of someone holding it together. It was a genuine quietness. Her makeup was light. There were fine lines under her eyes, but her gaze was not hollow like it had been at the law firm. She saw me approaching, and the corner of her mouth moved in what could be called a greeting. "I was passing by for some errands," she said, her voice very soft. "I saw the new sign outside, so I stopped to take a look. It looks good after the reconstruction," I said. "All the fireproofing materials have been replaced." "I know," she said. "I saw it on the news." Silence stretched between us for a moment. Someone pushed a baby stroller along the sidewalk, its bell ringing merrily. "How are you?" "Doing now?" she asked. hesitating slightly. Not bad. The company moved to the East District, more business than before, hired several new people. I said, "And you?" "I found work in the Southern New District," she said, tucking a strand of hair that had blown across her face behind her ear, "teaching first aid training courses. The students are mostly new workers from the factories and community volunteers. The pay is a lot less than before, but it's enough for just me." "That's good," I said. She nodded. Her gaze drifted past me and rested once more on the newly repainted building ahead. "Sometimes I think," she said, "if I had just listened to you back then and replaced those decorative panels, maybe that fire would never have gotten that big. And none of what followed would have happened." I did not respond to that, because what she said was the truth. "Did your father sell that SUV?" I asked her. The question was a little abrupt, but I meant it to be, not to make her uncomfortable, but because I suddenly wondered where Gu Liang had scraped together that 84,000 yuan. Gu Anran froze for a second, then lowered her head and let out a short laugh. That smile was very faint, but it was different from before. Before, when she smiled, her eyes smiled too. Now the smile only reached the corner of her mouth. Her eyes held something else. "He sold it," she said. "Bought a second-hand one instead. My mum fought with him for days over it, saying he didn't discuss it with the family before selling the car. Later, when she found out it was to pay you back, she stopped talking about it." "And Mingyue?" "Mingyue resigned from the sub-district office." Her tone was flat as she said this, like she was sharing a piece of news that had little to do with her. The investigation team audited several accounts she handled. Although she wasn't held legally responsible, the sub-district office gave her an administrative demerit. She couldn't stand the way her colleagues looked at her, so she quit. Now she's in Singapore for that management master's program. She saved up the money herself. Whatever's short, my mum is subsidizing. I nodded. I had heard about Gu Mingyue from Jin Ci long ago. When she resigned, she had posted a message online saying changing the environment to start fresh with a photo of an airport departure lounge. Under that post, not a single person we both knew had liked it. It's ironic, really. Gu Anran said suddenly, "Before our family was so lively. During the holidays, the table was always full. Now my dad spends all day cooped up at home. My mum doesn't go out except to buy groceries. Mingyue is in Singapore, in the Southern District. I went back to visit them last week. The three of them sat in the living room with the TV on, and no one said a word." She paused, as if organizing the next sentence. "Wen Ce, I've always wanted to ask you something." "Go ahead." "All those years ago, when you ate at my family's table, were you always uncomfortable?" The question caught me off guard. She never used to ask such things. Before, she would only say, "Eat more," or "Help me look over my dad's car maintenance record." I thought about it seriously, then answered, "It wasn't exactly discomfort. It was more that I gradually realized my seat at your family's table was the one for the person who solves problems. Car issues, me. Money issues, me. Mingyue going abroad, me. But your family's laughter was never aimed at me. It was aimed at Zhou Tingshan." Her eyelid twitched. "Zhou Tingshan." She repeated the name, as if chewing on a bitter tea leaf. "He doesn't have anything to do with our family anymore. After he was released, he called me once. He asked if I could help him find a job. I told him I couldn't help him, and he should never call again. He cursed at me over the phone and hung up." "What did he call you?" I asked. She pressed her lips together. "He called me an ingrate." I almost laughed. The word ingrate, coming from Zhou Tingshan's mouth, was as ironic as a thief cursing someone for not leaving the door open. "Do you hate him?" I asked her. She thought about it and shook her head. "I don't know. I feel like my feelings toward him are different from my guilt toward you. With you, I owe you a debt. With him, I finally figured something out." "What's that?" "He never truly cared about me. What he cared about was what I could bring him. Before, it was status and identity, the satisfaction of being Captain Gus' close confidant. Later, it was money and projects, using me to get things done at the sub-district office. He never cared about me." Her voice was very steady as she said this. It did not sound like an accusation. It sounded more like reciting the answer to a math problem she had finally understood. So everything you said before was right. You always told me he was using me and I didn't believe you. Now I've done the accounting myself and I see that you calculated every single transaction perfectly. I looked at her. Sunlight filtered through the gaps in the sycamore leaves, casting shifting patterns of light and shadow on her face. It's not that I'm good at accounting, I said. I just paid attention. Do you remember, every time you brought up something about Zhou Tingshen, your opening words were always the same 3 words? She paused, then slowly nodded. Don't be so petty. Those 3 words smoothed over every debt between us. Don't be so petty about his late-night calls. Don't be so petty about him patting you on the shoulder. Don't be so petty about him using my money to buy his reputation. Every time it was don't be so petty, and it all added up to me carrying a hole named Zhou Tingshen on my back for 5 years. Anran, you're standing here now telling me you've finally added up that account. I'm happy for you. But I will not help you share that burden anymore. Gu Anran stood there, the wind blowing the hem of her trench coat. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but in the end, only 2 words came out. Thank you. Not I'm sorry. Thank you. It took her 6 months to learn the difference between those 2 words. I have to get back, I said, glancing at my watch. I have a meeting this afternoon. Okay, she said, stepping back to clear the sidewalk. You're busy. I walked a few steps toward the parking lot, then suddenly stopped and turned around. She was still standing there, looking my way. You said you're teaching first aid training in the Southern New District? I asked. Yes. Do a good job. There are a lot of factories there. Safety training is a hard requirement. When you were a fire captain, your crew had a solid reputation in the industry. Gu Anran looked at me, and for a moment a light flickered in her eyes. Not tears. It was that faint, luminous quality that appears when someone receives an unexpected affirmation. That quality used to appear on her face all the time after she wrapped up a brilliant debriefing when her teammates surrounded her and called her Sister Anran. Then that light disappeared for a long time. Now it was back, even if only a little. I will, she said. I nodded, turned, and kept walking. After getting in the car, I started the engine and habitually glanced at the rear-view mirror. Under the sycamore tree, there was no one there anymore. Gu Anran was gone. I did not know when she had left or in which direction. But none of that had anything to do with me anymore. I put the car in gear and slowly pulled out of the parking lot. The white building of the Qinghai Center grew smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror, more and more distant. The newly installed exhaust pipes on the roof reflected silver in the sun. That corridor, once filled with thick smoke, now lay quietly bathed in sunlight. The man who once lay on the floor waiting to die now sat behind the steering wheel on his way to negotiate a new project. I rolled down the window a little. The early summer breeze rushed in, carrying the sweet scent of roasted sweet potatoes from a street vendor and the green grassy smell of sycamore leaves. My phone rang. It was Xiao Tang. Engineer Wen. The 3 o'clock meeting has been moved to 4. The client said their vice president has something come up and will be an hour late. That works out perfectly, I said, turning the steering wheel onto the expressway toward the company. I'll grab a bowl of noodles first. Just noodles? You're in that good of a mood? Not bad, I said. I hung up, turned on the radio, and randomly tuned to a station. An old song was playing, its melody lazy. I could not quite remember the lyrics, but it was something about a person walking in the sunlight, glancing back once at the past, and then continuing forward. I turned up the volume a little. Outside the car window, the city sprawled out under the sunlight. Overpasses, office towers, residential blocks, factory chimneys in the distance, everything was operating as normal. Those things I once thought I could never get past, looking back now, were just a stretch of road. I had walked through it. It was behind me. Not everyone can find their place again after the smoke clears. I found mine. I had been to the Southern New District twice before, both times for work. once to discuss a fire safety project for a logistics park, and once to attend a community safety experience sharing event organized by the Municipal Emergency Management Bureau. Both trips were brief, with no time to take a closer look at this newly built city. The third time was a purposeful trip. Not to find Gu Anran. Wen Ce had told me the community safety training in the Southern New District was doing quite well and had some innovative points worth referencing. He suggested I go take a look. I said okay, and then I drove there. The training site was set up in a modest classroom on the third floor of the Southern New District Workers' Cultural Center. Fire safety posters were taped to the walls, and in the corner sat a few practice fire extinguishers and CPR dummies. When I arrived, the session had not started yet. Students trickled in, mostly young people in work uniforms, more men than women, their faces carrying the fatigue of a just-finished night shift. I found a seat by the window in the back row. Outside the window, a row of newly planted sycamore trees lined the street, their trunks still supported by wooden stakes. The leaves were sparse and scattered like a group of toddlers just learning to stand. The bell rang. The instructor pushed the door open. It was indeed Gu Anran. She wore a dark blue work jacket with the logo of the Southern New District Safety Training Center on the left chest. Her hair was pulled back in a low ponytail, and she carried a folder and a stack of handouts. She came in with her head down, flipping through her notes, and did not look up to scan the room until she reached the podium. Her gaze swept across the back row and paused on me for a moment. Just a moment. Then she shifted her gaze away, placed the handouts on the podium, turned on the projector, and began addressing the room full of students. Today we'll cover Chapter 3, Basic First Aid at a Fire Scene. Last session, we discussed the classification and use of fire extinguishers. Today, we will focus on how to make an initial assessment and treatment of injured persons while waiting for professional rescue to arrive. Her voice was steady, not too fast, every word clearly pronounced. It was completely different from how she used to be during fire drills. Back then, her voice was loud enough to shake the dust off the ceiling. Now she seemed like a different person. Or rather, she seemed like she had found a different version of herself. She began explaining triage tags. Red for critical, yellow for serious, green for minor, black for deceased. She put up a slide with the 4 colored tags and corresponding illustrations. Pay special attention to green-tagged individuals, she said, pointing her laser at the green tag. A green tag means the person can walk, can talk, is breathing normally, and is fully conscious. When rescue resources are tight, green-tagged individuals have the lowest priority. You must reserve your limited resources for red and yellow tags. This principle applies in any fire. Her laser pointer hovered over the green tag for a moment, then moved away. I have made a mistake on this exact issue before. A subtle shift passed through the classroom atmosphere. Some students looked up, probably not expecting the instructor to say something like that. Gu Anran did not look at anyone. She continued her lecture. During one rescue operation, I evacuated a green-tagged person first and missed a trapped yellow tag. That was a lapse in my professional judgment. I am telling you this today not for your sympathy, but so you remember this. In a fire, every decision you make affects someone else's life. You cannot just rescue the person who is shouting the loudest. You must look at their vital signs, their location, the whole situation. Emotional decision-making is the biggest enemy of rescue work. The classroom was very quiet. The projector hummed softly. She flipped to the next slide. All right, let's continue with the techniques for cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Her 40-minute lecture was solid. No unnecessary words, no theatrics. Every operational detail was broken down clearly. She even called 2 students up to demonstrate. The students responded well, and a few gathered around her to ask questions after class. I waited until most of the students had left before standing up and walking to the front of the podium. She was tidying up her handouts. She looked up, saw me, and did not stop what she was doing. She simply said, "You came. I'm in the area for work. Thought I'd stop by," I said. She tucked the handouts into her folder and leaned against the edge of the podium looking at me. When I was lecturing just now, I saw you sitting in the back, and I almost forgot what I was going to say next. You did a great job, I said. Much better than the last training session I heard at the sub-district office. Really? She smiled. This time it was a genuine smile, the kind that reached her eyes. I used to think lecturing was easy. Just say what you know. Once I actually got on the podium, I realized you have to make the people listening truly take it in. It's not enough to just have the skill. It takes me 3 nights to prepare one lecture. That's good to hear. It is. She paused. I used to think that if I wasn't a captain anymore, I was nothing. The title was gone. The uniform was gone. The team was gone, and I would be empty. Later I found out the sky didn't fall. The only difference is I have to budget carefully now. Before, I'd swipe my card without thinking. Now I stand in the supermarket aisle and compare prices for ages. She said this in a very casual tone, as if telling someone else's story. How are your parents? I asked. Same as always. My dad goes to the park every morning to do Tai Chi and spends the afternoons at home watching war dramas on TV. My mum signed up for a calligraphy class at the senior university. Her handwriting is better than mine now. She paused. Last week, I went home for dinner. Out of nowhere, my dad asked me, Anran, do you regret it? I said, I do. He was silent for a long time. Then he said he regretted it too. He shouldn't have pressured you at that dinner. I was slightly taken aback. She continued. My dad has never spoken a soft word in his life. After he said that, he raised his glass of wine and drank it by himself. My mum was washing dishes in the kitchen with the water running, but I knew she was listening. I looked out the window. Those newly planted sycamores swayed gently in the wind. Your dad's 84,000, I said. He sold his car to put it together. Yeah. He sold that SUV and bought a second-hand Jetta. He went alone the day he sold it. When he came back, he put the check on the table and walked away without a word. My mum told me later that he smoked half a pack of cigarettes on the balcony. I had never seen Gu Anran smoke before. Gu. Anran held her folder against her chest, leaned on the podium and looked at the empty classroom. I used to think dignity meant never lowering your head. Later, I learnt that lowering your head takes even more courage. The only reason you don't lower your head is because someone else is bending over for you. When that person is gone, you have to learn to bend on your own. After she said this, the classroom was quiet for a long while. The projector's cooling fan still whirred. Birds chirped outside the window. The shouts of workers unloading cargo drifted up from downstairs. I should go, I said. I still have a project to discuss at the logistics park. Okay, she said, straightening up. I'll see you out. No need. Your next class is about to start, isn't it? She glanced at the clock on the wall. Still 15 minutes. We walked together to the entrance of the cultural center. The sunlight outside was a bit glaring, blanketing the steps in a white haze.
Wen Ce,
she said, standing in the doorway, the sun casting her shadow long upon the ground. Will you come by again sometime? Well, see how the projects go, I said. She nodded, as if this answer was exactly what she had expected. Then she reached into the pocket of her work jacket and pulled out an envelope. It was the most ordinary kind of brown craft paper envelope, unsealed, its corners slightly worn, as if it had been carried around for a long time. This is for you, she said. I glanced at the envelope but did not reach for it. I wanted to give it to you that time outside the Qinghe Center, she said, holding the envelope out further. I wrote it a long time ago. It's not asking for your forgiveness and it's not begging you to come back. It's just some words that were never said before. In saying them now, I looked at that envelope. On the surface of the craft paper, there was a small patch that was slightly darker than the surrounding area, as if it had once been stained by water. No need to read it, I said. Some words, once the moment has passed, there's no need to fill them in. Her hand hung in the air for 2 seconds, then slowly withdrew, tucking the envelope back into her pocket. Her movements were very gentle as laying down a feather. "All right," she said, "then I'll keep it for you." Her voice was steady. It did not waver. Her eyes did not redden. This was the first time, in all the years I had known her, that I had seen her face loss without her eyes turning red. "Give a good lecture this afternoon," I said. "I will." She smiled, took a step back, and stood beneath those sycamore trees that had not yet fully grown. "I hope your project discussion goes well too." I turned and walked toward the parking lot. After a few steps, I heard her voice behind me. "Wen Ce, thank you for coming to see me." I looked back at her. She was still standing under those sycamores, her work jacket puffed slightly by the wind. A few strands of hair had escaped her ponytail and floated beside her cheek. The sunlight fell on her, outlining her silhouette with a fuzzy golden edge. "I didn't come specifically to see you," I said. "I came for work and stopped by." "I know," she said. "Thank you for stopping by." I smiled. She smiled, too. In that instant, I suddenly recalled a scene from many years ago. We were not married yet. She had just been promoted to deputy captain. I went to the fire station to pick her up after her shift. She came running out the main gate in her training uniform, sweaty, her face still smeared with grime, waving at me from a distance and shouting, "Wen Ce, I was the first one in today." Back then, her eyes shone as if they held all the stars of an entire summer. Now, she stood beneath that row of not yet full-grown sycamores, wearing a dark blue work jacket, holding her folder of lecture notes, smiling quietly. The fine lines at the corners of her eyes were visible in the sunlight, but those eyes were still bright. Not the stars from before. It was a different kind of light, like a lamp still burning after the storm. I got into the car and started the engine. In the rear-view mirror, she was still standing there, watching my car slowly pull out of the parking lot. Once I turned onto the main road, her figure was finally obscured by the roadside greenery. Driving out of the city, I glanced down at the project documents sitting on the passenger seat. And then I suddenly understood why Gu Ce had suggested I come to the Southern New District. That guy, it was a waste for him to be a lawyer. He might have been better off as a director. Gu Ce was the type who would never say, "Go see her." He would say, "The community training in the Southern New District has an innovative point worth referencing." Then let you discover for yourself what that innovative point truly was. I rolled the window down and let the wind pour in. The highway was nearly empty. On both sides stretched vast expanses of farmland and factories. In the distance, the mountains lay faintly across the horizon. What was written in that unaccepted letter, I did not know, and I would never guess. Those words, how long she had spent writing them, how many times she had revised them, at which line her tears had fallen, none of it had anything to do with me anymore. Because my reply had already been given the moment I turned away. Not every letter needs to be opened. Not every word needs to be heard. Some farewells are by nature silent. The radio broadcast a weather forecast. A cold front was moving south next week and it might snow. I turned the car's heater up a notch. A thought suddenly surfaced in my mind. Next summer I should come back here. Those sycamores should have grown taller by then. 3 years later, on the day Wen Ce Safety Consulting established its Singapore branch, I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of a Marina Bay office building, watching the cargo ships coming and going in the harbor below. The sunlight turned the sea into a sheet of shattered silver, and the container cranes at the dock turned slowly like a row of silent giraffes. Gu Ce stood beside me, holding a cup of coffee, and sighed at the view. 3 years ago, you were lying in a hospital bed, signing an emergency contact change form. Now you're standing in a Singapore office tower, signing the incorporation papers for a branch.
Life is truly unpredictable.
Your sentiment is a bit too formal, I said. Save that line for the branch inauguration speech. No way, speeches cost extra. We both laughed. The branch ribbon cutting was scheduled for 10 in the morning. Several company partners, local client representatives, and a few media reporters were in attendance. When I went on stage to give my remarks, someone in the audience asked, "Mr. Wen, When you first founded Wen Ce Safety, did you ever imagine you would one day expand your business overseas? I said, not at all. Back then, my only goal was to finish a safety inspection at a community center and go home for dinner. A few chuckles came from the audience. I did not say the second half of that sentence. The safety inspection was finished. The dinner never happened. But that chapter of my life no longer stirred any ripples in my heart. Time is like water. The places it flows over, the sharp edges eventually wear smooth. After the ceremony, Wen Ce sent me a news link. His expression was neutral, but I noticed that when he handed me his phone, his thumb paused over the screen for an extra second. It's from back home. The final investigation report on the Qinghe Center fire. I clicked the link. The report was very long, over 20,000 words, covering everything from the cause of the fire to the review of the rescue process, from the misuse of funds to the subsequent accountability. Every section was exhaustively detailed. The part of the conclusion regarding Gu Anran was only a short paragraph, worded with restraint. Former fire squadron Captain Gu Anran exhibited errors in judgment and falsified reporting during the rescue operation. In consideration of her proactive cooperation with the investigation and truthful account of the facts, an administrative demerit of a serious nature is given, and her firefighter qualification is revoked. But at the end of the report, there was an appendix listing the achievements in community safety education following the reconstruction of the Qinghe Center. It noted that the Southern New District Safety Training Center had carried out a series of public welfare first aid courses for industrial workers, with training reaching over 5,000 person times, and had received commendation from the Municipal Emergency Management Bureau. In the list of course instructors, there was one name, Gu Anran. I read that news item twice. Then I turned off my phone and put it back in my pocket. Aren't you going to say something? Wen Ce asked. Say about what? You put her on trial, Wen Ce said, and she paid the price. In the end, she stood back up in a way you never expected. Then it's good that she stood back up, I said. It was not a polite platitude. I meant it. The debts between Gu Anran and me had been fully settled 3 years ago, on that rainy day outside the Civil Affairs Bureau, on that conference table covered in legal documents. Once a debt is settled, both sides become parallel lines, extending onward, never to intersect again. Whether she did well or poorly would not change my life. But the fact that she was doing well at least meant that those costs had not been in vain, and those lessons had not been learned for nothing. That afternoon, I received an email. The sender was the logistics supervisor of the Southern New District Safety Training Center. They were planning to expand their practical training base this year and wanted to procure a batch of fire simulation equipment meeting international standards. Having heard that Wen Ce Safety had resources in Singapore in this area, they were sending a request for quotation. The email was worded very formally, purely business, with a list of required specifications attached at the end. The email was sent to a group, and the recipient list included several supplier names. This list of requirements sat in my inbox without any special significance, just like any other ordinary business inquiry. I forwarded the email to the head of our procurement department and copied Xiao Tang. At the bottom, I added a note, process according to standard procedure. No special treatment required. After finishing work, I walked out of the office building alone. The evening in Singapore was humid and warm, the air carrying a faint saltiness from the sea. I took a slow walk along the Marina Bay promenade. I passed an ice cream cart with a line of school children chattering away. I passed a street performer playing a lazy jazz tune on a saxophone, the notes drifting lazily in the sea breeze. At a crosswalk, while waiting for the red light, I looked at the reflection of myself in the glass curtain wall of the building opposite. A suit, shorter hair, a few more strands of white at the temples. Compared to the man who lay in a hospital bed 3 years ago signing an emergency contact change form, the man in the reflection stood straighter, and his brow was no longer permanently furrowed. 3 years ago, my phone was filled with evidence, recordings, screenshots, photos of triage records. Every single one was an arrow aimed at an enemy. Now, my phone mostly held project proposals, contract terms, team photos. Back then, I thought revenge was a thrilling thing. Later, I discovered that true satisfaction is not dragging others down. It is rising up yourself so high that you no longer feel the need to look back. The light turned green. I crossed the street, my reflection moving off the glass curtain wall and merging into the crowd. At that same moment, in the southern New District of China, the row of sycamore trees planted in front of the Workers' Cultural Center had grown as tall as a 3-story building. Gu Anran had just finished her afternoon class. She put her handouts into that canvas bag she had used for 3 years, its edges now frayed. She turned off the classroom lights and walked down the hallway to the administration office door. The logistics supervisor, old Zhou, was frowning at his computer. He looked up when he saw her and waved her over. "Xiao Gu, perfect timing. For the fire simulation equipment procurement for the training base, we sent out requests for quotation to several companies. Help me look over these suppliers' qualifications. My eyes are going blurry." Gu Anran walked over to the computer and looked down at the list of suppliers on the screen. Her gaze paused for a moment around the middle of the list. Wen Ce Safety Consulting, Singapore P8E Limited. She looked at it for about 3 seconds. Then she calmly reached out, took the mouse, and scrolled down. "This one from Singapore looks good. Relatively new qualifications, sufficient overseas resources. Compared to the others, the cost-performance ratio is decent." She pointed at the screen with her pen. "You can prioritize negotiating with them." Old Joe nodded and put a checkmark next to Wen Ce Safety. Gu Anran straightened up, hitched her canvas bag higher onto her shoulder. "I'm off now. I have an evening class for community volunteers." "All right, take care." She walked out of the office, down the hallway, and pushed open the glass doors of the cultural center. The sun outside was blinding, laying a white blanket over everything. The sycamores at the entrance were in their most lush season, their canopies linking together to shade half the sidewalk. Standing in the shade, she squinted at the spots of sunlight filtering through the leaves. Then she took a pair of sunglasses from her canvas bag, put them on, and walked toward the bus stop. She did not know if I had moved to Singapore. She was not sure if that request for quotation would ever pass through my hands. But she remembered very clearly that 3 years ago, when she stood at the entrance of this cultural center holding out that envelope, the wind was strong and the sycamores had not yet grown tall. She had told herself she would say everything she needed to say in person, but in the end she managed less than half. That letter had stayed in the drawer of her apartment ever since, pressed beneath a few training manuals. She had moved twice, and each time she kept it in the same document pouch as her diplomas and ID card. She never opened it. She never threw it away. Some things are kept not to be opened, but to prove that they were written. Just as some names are remembered not to be contacted, but so that one never forgets the mistakes one made. The bus arrived. She tapped her card and got on, finding a seat by the window. Outside, the skyline of the new city was constantly changing. New buildings, new roads, new factories, new people. Looking out the window, she thought to herself that this city was growing up too. When those sycamores were first planted, she had even worried they would not survive. Now they were unapologetically green. She suddenly remembered that many years ago, someone had told her that sycamores grow fast but have shallow roots and are easily toppled by strong winds. To truly live well, a tree must sink its roots deep. That person should be doing quite well now. The bus turned a corner. The sunlight shifted and fell on her face from another direction. She closed her eyes, turned her face toward the light, and the corner of her mouth moved, though no sound came out. Many years later, I was working late at my office in Singapore. My assistants had all gone home. The office was quiet, with only the lamp on my desk still lit. My phone screen lit up. It was a message from Gu Anran. We were not friends on any chat app, but we shared a work group for an international community safety project. She had posted a message in the group. It was a registration link for a training course. I clicked it and looked. It was a course she had designed. I exited without liking it. I just clicked on her profile. deleted the 3 characters Gu Anran and left only one word, Gu. I went back to the chat list and set that group to Do Not Disturb. I worked late that night. By the time I left, mine was the only window in the entire building still lit. Waiting for the elevator, I stood at the window at the end of the hallway and looked out. The night view of Singapore was different from back home. Quieter. More orderly. Like a meticulously designed sand table. I suddenly remembered that night so many years ago. The east corridor of the Qinghe Center, thick smoke filling the hallway, the fire door groaning behind me. I lay on the floor and called out a name into the walkie-talkie. No one answered. That was probably the closest she and I had ever been in these 10 years. The elevator arrived. The doors slid open and warm yellow light spilled out. I walked in and pressed the button for the ground floor. The elevator began its descent. The floor numbers ticked down one by one. Watching those changing numbers, a thought suddenly rose in my mind. If one day in some corner of the world I happened to run into her again, there should be one thing I would say. But the elevator doors opened. Outside was the lobby, the revolving doors, the city at night. What that one thing was, it did not seem to matter anymore. I pushed through the revolving doors and stepped into the warm Singapore night. Behind me, the building blazed with lights. Ahead of me, the city flowed on without end. To some people, all you need to say is, "I wish you well."